Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to show 10. Roger Martin and I here to talk about the 4 key characteristics of strategic thinking. I feel like it was just show 1, but it's been so well received. We just keep going. So as long as you guys keep showing up and asking great questions and engaging, we will keep doing the show. So welcome to show 10, Roger.
It's good to be here. It's good. It's good to know it's 10. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, I feel like, 10 over, it's every other week, every other Wednesday, 9 a.m. Pacific, depending on where you are in the world. Here we are again. But this time, I want to start on something that I think many executives have a problem accepting.
Okay. You've got me curious.
They don't have control.
Good point.
And
No,
I always
true.
say,
That's true.
look, the only thing a sales rep can control, because that's sort of my world, but
Yes.
you cannot control your commission plan. Too bad. I wish you could, right? You can't almost ever control what accounts you get to sell to, what CRM system you use, what your pricing is. Like, we have very little control as sales reps. So I always try to tell sellers, people who, the one thing you can control is how you show up.
Yes.
Like, that you can control. Everything else is sort of out of your control.
Yes.
So let's associate that with strategic thinking. That
Sure.
Thinking about how in strategy you seek to influence things, big influence, that are not in your control.
That's right. That's right. And the number one thing that isn't in your control, and a salesperson would know this more than anything else, is the customer. You can absolutely control how you show up, as you say, but they will do what they want to do, right? This is not indentured servitude. This is not a draft. They'll do what they want to do, and that lack of control, in my view, often has executives it's almost like averting their eyes. It's like, I don't want to think about that. I'm going to think about all the things I do control. I control how many employees, the comp plan that I design, blah, blah, blah. I control all those things. And they spend their time saying, if I focus on those controllable things, something good will happen with those customers. And it just doesn't. And a strategic thinker starts there and says, the thing I don't control is customers. I would like them to do something. There's a desired set of actions that I'd like them to take. Buy my stuff for a good price over their stuff, or and not at a big discount. How do I then configure everything that is in my control to get the action I want and the thing, compel the action that I want? I can't force it, but I can compel it by being something that they think is the customers think is well worth the price. And that's, to be a strategic thinker, you have to have that mindset that says, there's this big thing lurking out there that I don't control. So my job is to compel the action I want. And the only way I can compel that is if everything, and I like I didn't use that in the article, but it's a good notion, how you show up. In some sense, how the company shows up in front of that customer. Like, does it show up, or can't the customer even find you in the first place? But if the customer sees you, your offering, whether it's accompanied by a person, if it's a B2B direct sales thing, or it's on a shelf, how you show up will either cause them to take the action you want or not. And that is a strategist's mindset, a strategist's way of thinking.
And I think the word in this is, while you can't control it, we do our best to influence it, right? So if we go back to like customers, we can't control what they do and how they find, but we sure can make it easier when they do find us to do commerce with us, right? To order something with us, to pay from us. And we may go, we want them to do step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that perfect order. It's like the funnel. Yeah. If you've ever heard me talk, I'm not a fan of the funnel, because it's just, the funnel is like, it's this beautiful waterfall. We start here and we go here and we go here. Like, it's messy. Like, it's
Yes.
never quite that easy. But you
No.
want to influence them to do what you want them to do at each stage. And so understanding that and influencing that, and not being able to control sort of external factors. What is your advice when someone's like, look, you know, people tell me, go talk to customers before you make this decision, or look at what the market's doing, look externally, or the reason we're not growing is all this external factors. But yet research says, it's Bain research, it's a little dated, but it's mostly internal inertia and bureaucracy that holds companies back from being flexible. It isn't really external things that are stopping them. So it is things within their control, right? Like, to the point, I can control internally what tools we use, how do we set up, how do we show up, what is our pricing, what do our products look like, are they good quality, like all of those things you can control. Then you have to say, how do I take what I can control and influence my customer, right? The person who is going to give me money,
Yes.
how they do that and how easy they do that, while at the same time keeping an eye on the things I really can't control externally. If I
Yeah.
had to, right?
Yep. So I haven't seen that research, but it makes some sense to me for what it's worth. And I really think that when a company is stopped by internal things, if Bain would say, "Oh, that's an internal thing that they were stopped by," I think it's typically because they don't see the link between that and the customer, right? They're sort of oblivious to, oh, the thing we do here is really not what the customer really wants, doesn't make it easier for it, makes it harder for the customer. And so I can well see that as the case. I still probably put it at the feet of too much obsessing about the internal systems that we control, and not enough real desire to understand what will compel the customer to take the action we
Right.
want.
Right.
Because if you really were focused on that, Bain wouldn't come to that conclusion in their study, right? There wouldn't be all those internal blockages in place, because somebody would have said, wow, we got to get rid of that internal thing that we're totally in control of. Customers hate that,
That's right.
but we still do it. Let's get rid of that. They would have that. So I kind of think it's a bit of a lack of that linkage between that thing. You really have to obsess about the thing that, as you said in the intro, that executives often don't like, that thing that you don't
Right.
control. They are free
Right.
agents. They can do whatever they want. They can be very annoying, right? They can stop using you, and you got to figure out why.
All right. So the first one seeks to influence what's not in your control.
Yep.
That's the sort of the 4 key characteristics. That's one. 2 is consumes information and more than just qualitative data or quantitative data. And I'd love for you to walk through that, because there's no shortage of data. You and I've talked about it on a number of our past shows.
Yeah.
And so is it, I need to wait for the data? I need to keep looking for the data. Am I looking for data that validates what I want it to tell me versus data that is actually accurate? What's the trick with consuming information? Just,
Yeah.
always ferociously doing so.
Well, and the biggest and most important piece of it, to me at least, Tiffany, is the omnivorous part of it. Right? So you want to be an information omnivore. And what do I mean by that? You see all sorts of kinds of information as being valuable. And you and I both would know, like, data hounds, right? Who say it's only if it is quantitative data, where there's a number attached to it, will I pay any attention to it. Um, well, they miss out on every piece of qualitative data that is out there. Now, if you say all I care about is qualitative data, well, then you're going to miss all the quantitative data that you can. If you only consider kind of stuff from these kind of people only consider things from customers, and you don't consider, let's say you have a distribution channel, you don't consider information from the distribution channel. You say, no, it's all about the end customers. That's being like the moral equivalent of a carnivore or herbivore. You only will eat certain things. Omnivores, I think, have an advantage in life in general, which is they can eat lots of things. Humans have an advantage of being omnivores and can eat everything. You should treat information that way, which is all kinds of information. Like I've often said, right? Like sometimes for like a B2B customer, the way the CEO kind of tilted his or her head when you said that might be the most important piece of data you got in the whole sales call, right? And if you ignore that entirely, it's at your peril, because he gave you a tell. It's right, like saying in a poker game, I will not ever look at my fellow players. I don't want to. Well, then you're not going to get any of their tells. So how they've bet the previous 5 hands, when they threw their cards in, all of those things, while they're not necessarily quantitative data, 73% of the time he or she did this. No, but it's like, I see this pattern, and I see them looking a little bit nervous as they turned over the peeked at their cards. There's the tells. So that's what I mean. A great strategist don't get tunnel vision on only one kind of data. It's any and all kind of data get thrown in the mix.
All right. So now we got influence, we've got data, and the next one is just logic. Like I am guilty of being like really logical. Like it sometimes drives those around me crazy. Doesn't mean I'm right.
Tiffany,
it doesn't mean I'm right, but I try to be like I'm really logical. Like that, just logically, that makes no sense to me. Like common sense, logic, but not all logic is created equal. And so walk us through sort of the different kinds of, if you will, logic that you think people should really hone the skill on, because they are different. Yeah.
Sure. Well, we're only taught 2 kinds of logic systematically, right? We're taught deductive logic, which is taking a general rule and apply it to a specific situation. When you learn the times tables, you're learning deductive logic. 7 times 7 is always 49. So if you see 7, multiply it. If I don't know, you see 7 rows and there's 7 things in each of the rows, you can deduce that there are 49 things there. That's one kind of logic. So you're taught that from the word go. You're taught inductive logic, especially if you've taken a statistics course. You're told, hey, if you go out and talk to 1,000 people and 800 of them say I like orange, and 200 say I like green, you can inductively say people like orange more than green, because I've gone from the specific to make a general rule. Those are the only 2 kinds of logic that we're taught. It turns out that actually you can't get a new idea from applying either of those 2 kinds of logics. And a great American pragmatist philosopher, Charles Sanders Peirce, was a bit of a nut, but it was super smart nut. It just made the point. He said, last time I checked, there's lots of new ideas in the world. And if you can't show how you can get to a new idea through deduction or induction, there must be another kind of logic. And he called it abductive logic, or abductive reasoning. And he referred to it when he was more playful as a logical leap of the mind, and more technically he called it inference to the best explanation. So if you don't have a deductive rule that applies to something, so let's say you see something and there's not a deductive rule that you can apply to it, and there's not enough of it to follow inductive logical things. So there's one, right? Not 1,000 data points. What he says is the human mind will try and infer the best explanation of that. So if you're a camper, aren't you? Yes, as I recall. So
Yes.
you're out camping in the snow somewhere in the Rockies, and
Or the beach.
no. We need snow here,
Okay,
and
we need snow.
we need snow. So you're camping in the Rockies rather than on the beach, which I know you'd like better. And you wake up in the morning, you come out, and there are footprints around your tent, right? And what the human mind will do is, you could say, well, somebody was pranking me and they put a claw mark thing around just
Yeah.
to get to scare me. Your best friend in the other tent was just trying to scare you. There's all sorts of things that you could imagine had caused that, but you will make an inference to the best explanation. What's the best explanation for that? Well, it looks kind of like a bear. I guess I was visited by a bear at night. Thank goodness he didn't rip my tent open and rip my lungs out. So he said human beings have that capacity of that form of logic. And what he said was the greatest innovations come from that, saying, I don't have a rule here. This doesn't maybe obey the rules, what I saw, and I only saw one of that. Why don't I try it? So we got these things called computers, and they have screens on them. And I observed when I was at Reed College some really interesting stuff in my calligraphy class. Maybe I could make things look prettier than they now look on these ugly computer screens by taking some of that applied to that. Is that inductive? Did Steve Jobs have a statistically significant sample size to make that on? Was there a rule for this brand new thing that would say that you should apply, calligraphy always to computer screens? No, but he said, I think, right? If I put myself in the mind of a person having to stare at one of these screens all the time, what could I imagine them liking best? Well, something that was similar to that. And so if you're going to be a strategist and you're going to create strategies that are unique, right? Because if you create a strategy that's identical to all your competitors, it ain't going to be so hot. You want to create a unique one. You're going to have to be able to do those logical leaps of the mind, the inference to best explanation. And this relates to number 2 in the sense that you're not going to be tied down by needing to have massive numbers, a statistically significant sample of something, or having an established rule, right? Think of how many industries operate by the rule you can never do that. You have to follow this rule. Tiffany, are you following the rules that we all know work in you were at Salesforce, that work in enterprise SaaS sales? That's what people tie themselves to, even though they don't know they're doing it. They tie themselves to deductive and inductive logic and say everything else is whimsical, illogical. It isn't. Peirce explained that there is logic behind it. It's just a different form. And Tiffany, it's not taught. It's simply not taught.
Yeah, well, we could go on and on about what's taught in school. If you haven't ever heard of Roger and I on my podcast, we talk about this all the time, about what's taught in MBA, what's not, and do you need one, do you not, for another day. Yes. But the fourth one to keep us on is considers multiple variables simultaneously. And I think this is the ability to, I'm just going to air quote multitask, right? Not really, but this considering things, at the same time, and not necessarily sequentially. Like, okay, I know this, I figured it out. Because of that, I can go next. Instead of going, I know this, but this is popping up. Are these two things related? and will it lead me to something if I maybe combine them, or I'm building upon them, or this one is no longer. And so you're having to kind of be able to have a beginner's mind, right? Of let new information come in, while your expert's mind is saying what I already know, and how do you bring those two things together? And I think simultaneously is really what's most challenging.
Yes, no, I agree, and if we just use from the toolbox that I teach, the 5 choices in the strategy choice cascade, you can use that choice cascade, and you lock and load on winning aspiration, and then you say trick, then you lock and load, start thinking about and lock and load on where to play, then you lock and load on how to win, and capabilities, management systems. And I guarantee you will have a crappy strategy. You've used my tool completely, each box, but it's because you considered them, as you said, Tiffany, sequentially rather than simultaneously. You have to keep in mind the other 4 boxes while kind of putting some attention to one of the boxes. It's sort of like foreground, background. One comes to the foreground a little, but the others have to be kind of in the background, and we're not taught that. Modern education, the modern direction of the world, says split things into specialty areas and have Tiffany, because her specialty, let's say sales, we're going to say you think about all the sales things, and Roger, you're a real marketer, you think of all the marketing things, and Tiffany optimizes for sales, Roger optimizes for marketing, and the two have nothing to do with one another, and they collide and are a disaster. And of course, that
like
never
a
happens,
normal sales and marketing situation.
exactly. And the reason is they violate number 4. They don't consider those things simultaneously. And then if you throw in finance, and you throw in manufacturing, and you throw in supply chain, and they're all doing the same thing, that's why you have such screwed up businesses with screwed up strategies. It's because they aren't thinking about those variables simultaneously.
The key term there, right? Screwed up businesses. That's the technical term.
Yes,
That's the technical term.
I use the nice version.
Yes, we are. We try to keep it as PG as possible. So I want to round this conversation out, because I wanted to put this up, right? The 4 characteristics, we went through all of them. If you are saying, look, I want to be more strategic in my role, or I aspire to think more and be more strategic in the business, or I want to look to go and be in a strategy role. There are strategy roles, right? Or planning, or whatever it might be. Rogers outlined the disqualifiers, which I think is important, right? We know what we should be doing, but what are the things that get you out of strategic thinking? And I'm going to name the 4.
Yes.
And then Roger, maybe you can say what of the 4, kind of while I'm going through them, which one do you think people should be pay most attention to?
That's a good question. Yeah.
All right.
All
right. So the first one, if you think you are in control, which is where we started this, of all strategic variables, you can't be a useful strategic thinker. Like, just say it like it is, Roger. You just can't, right? So if you think you can't control, if you can control the strategic variables, you can't be a useful strategic thinker. All right. Number 2, if you limit yourself to statistically significant quantitative data to inform your decisions, you can't be a strategic thinker. Number 3, if you think that you can depend on the inductive and deductive logic that you were taught to make all decisions rationally and rigorously, you can't be a useful strategic thinker. And last but not least, if you think you can work through your strategy decisions sequentially, one variable at a time, you can't be a useful strategic thinker. I feel like I'm just not a useful strategic thinker, because I know I've done all of them. But all right, so those were the 4. I don't have an image for it, but those are the 4. If there was one that you could say, look, if there's one of these 4 that it's the one that I most deal with when you're out and about in the wild working with executives, that I could really help them fix, which of those 4 would it be?
Well, can I answer it the following way? Is
Sure.
which is related to which would I have them work on building their skills in first? Because that's similar to your question. I think it would be the last one. Um, like if I was just thinking of a training program for somebody to become a useful strategist who isn't,
Yep.
I would say get them started on being able to see the pieces of the puzzle together and have them co-vary. And once they can start to do that, then I would probably move them to number one, right? And to say, okay, so the job is compelling customer action that you don't control them, so you've got to work about compelling them, and that involves an integrative set of choices. I've just taught you to think about more things at once. So you're progressing. Then when they contemplate, well, how, if I'm thinking that way, how can I do something special? I would say I would teach them that abductive logic is as powerful and rigorous actually as inductive and deductive, even though you were never taught them. I'll teach you that. And then as they're trying to figure out how to make that choice, I'd say let's be omnivorous about data and teach them how to say here's how you can make inferences from a data set of one, right? Here's how you can ignore the deductive rules that supposedly work and still live to tell the tale. So I'd probably have that sequence of teaching. It's sort of a bit of a layering on, just as they need it. I'd layer on the next piece of knowledge. But as usual, Tiffany, you asked me good questions because I'd never thought of it in that way before until you asked me that question. But that would be my teaching process.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from, it was many years ago, I went through this exercise of trying to determine what my superpowers were.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and so that I could double down on my
Good,
superpowers, right?
good
And so
exercise.
one of them was that I am able to see all the stars in the sky and very quickly see the Big Dipper. Like it's like I could take lots of data input and very quickly, it may not, I may not see a pretty Big Dipper first, right? It might not be perfect, but I very quickly can sort of assess simultaneously multiple sort of data sources. And then through that exercise, I learned what was not my superpowers,
Yes.
right? Because you have to have both. And
Right.
and those are things that if I needed to get better on in order to help me be better at my superpower, that I needed to hone in on it. If it was things that was just going to be noise for me and I want to go get better at it just because someone says I'm not very good at it, but it's not going to lead me to where I want to be, is that really where I need to spend my time? So that's what I was thinking as you were walking through
Yeah,
those,
yeah,
like, right, if I'm not going to be a good strategic thinker on this and this, but I'm not very good. I am a linear thinker. I have to kind of get through one room before I get to the next room, which was our previous show.
yeah.
You know, it, is that going to serve me well as a strategic thinker, or do I have to really get better at that simultaneous thinking, that I can't be so linear? And that might be, as a leader, you kind of go, I have to get better at this, because
Yeah.
if I'm blinded and, as you said, so hyper focused on one that I have blinders on and everything else, I may be racing to the wrong decision.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that strikes me, Tiffany, and maybe we can talk about this on another one of these, is that if that's your superpower, uh, growth IQ is no surprise, right? Right. Like it's here's how you think
Yeah.
about all 10 ways to grow and how to combine them separately. Wouldn't you say
Well,
that would flow directly from that as a superpower?
well, w- thank you for that. But I would say that playing to win was really the springboard for growth IQ. It was like, okay, if Roger's right, let's assume Roger's right.
Mhm.
If Roger's right, and this is how to play to win, and these are the questions you need to ask. That was the first part of the book, context, and then it was like combination. Is this, have to think about it together, right? It can't
Yep.
be sequential. That, yeah, it is a combination, and then third was sort of that sequence of order, which you and I have talked about a bunch on. Is the order matter in the strategy as well? Which
Yep.
we think that there is. So yeah, maybe on the next show, maybe the 11th and 12th, we will dig into growth IQ. But
That makes sense.
all right, well, anything left you would like to cover off on the 4 key characteristics
No.
of
Oh, well,
strategic
only
thinking?
only just think. I didn't write that article to depress or intimidate anyone. I wrote it as with the spirit of, you can grow all these skills. These are not inherent in a human being. They are things you can grow and build. And I would say, use the piece, use this podcast session as a bit of a training tool to get yourself practiced at those things, so you can become good at all those. There's no such thing as a person who is born a strategic thinker or not. There's just ones that are more trained than not, who've worked on themselves more.
Well, as I mentioned, this is show 10. Sequentially, start at 1 and work your way back to this one. And some of the things we talked about will be a little bit more clear. But thank you again for joining us on the 10th episode, if you will, of Playing to Win Practitioner's Insight. I'm Tiffany Bova.
I'm Roger Martin.
And thank you guys. We'll see you next time.